Welcome to Craft a Brew. Let's make a fruit wine from juice. So today we're making a country fruit wine from juice, and we're going to be adding a little bit of sugar to up the ABV. This is called chaptalization, and essentially what you're doing is adding more sugar for the yeast to eat. They will convert that into alcohol, so you have a higher ABV than just using straight juice. Now, contrary to popular belief, adding more sugar for your wine does not necessarily equate to having a sweeter wine on the other side. And in large part, that's because the wine yeast that we're using these days have a very high alcohol tolerance. So with proper practice and yeast nutrient and good fermentation temperatures, the yeast should be able to cut through all the fermentable sugars that you add in there, leading to a dry wine on the other end of things. Then, after we stabilize it, we can add some sugar back to it if we want a sweet wine. And we'll be doing that in this video. This is a little bit of a different process from making a fruit wine using whole fruit. We also have a video on how to do that, and a link to that video will be in the description of this video if you'd like to check that out. One advantage to this process is you're just using juice and sugar and yeast and a couple little additives depending on what the recipe looks like. That means you're not dealing with pulp and fruit skins and seeds and all of that stuff. You're just working with juice, meaning that fermentation tends to go a little bit quicker and smoother. It tends to clarify quicker, and all that means you end up getting to drink your wine a little bit sooner than if you were using whole fruit. Both practices have their advantages and turn into completely different products, and so I would encourage you, if you're just starting out in your winemaking journey, to try each. We've got a ton of recipes in the instructional book that comes in our wine kit, so pick one of each, a juice wine and a whole fruit wine, and see how they compare. In this video, we're going to be making a cranberry juice wine, and we're going to be using cran-apple juice to make this wine because the acid profile is a little less intense, meaning that it's generally a smoother and more palatable product for most folks versus fermenting just straight up cranberry juice. Can you do cranberry juice? Absolutely, but you might find that you want a little bit more back sweetening in that versus using cran-apple juice, which is all in all just kind of a smoother juice to ferment. So before we get started, let's take a look at what's inside of the wine kit. I'm really excited to show you this wine kit because I helped develop the recipes in the instruction booklet. And so I'm really happy with how the booklet turned out. I think it's one of the best home winemaking guides that I have seen for the beginner. And the recipes are just right in the middle. Just flip to the fold, and then that's where the recipes start. And today we're going to be making this cranberry wine. Included in your wine kit are multiple packets of yeast. Each of these packets is 5 grams of yeast, meaning it's good for 5 gallons of wine. You just need 1 gram for every gallon of wine. However, in this video today, we're going to be pitching a full 5-gram packet of yeast. We have 2 different yeasts that we include in here. One is good for red wines and dark colored fruits. The other is good for white wines and lighter colored fruits. We've also got this little baggie that includes an airlock, a stopper, the cap for the end of your racking cane, and a hose clamp. There's your racking cane. You've got a packet of sanitizer. You've got a packet of Wine Tannin. Acid blend. There's your nutrient for your yeast. Your Camden tablets, which are potassium metabisulfite tablets. Potassium sorbate, which together with your Camden tablets are how you stabilize your wine if you want to back sweeten. Your Pectic Enzyme. Here's the bag that you would use if you're going to use fruit in your wine. Your carboy. The hose for your racking cane. And lastly, here's your lid for your bucket. That's a nice looking bucket. Okay, now that everything is out of the box, let's get reset a little bit, get all of our ingredients together and ready to go, and we'll make some wine. All right, we've got all of our ingredients set out here. We're ready to brew, but first thing we gotta do is get all of our gear sanitized. So we're gonna use 2.5 teaspoons of sanitizer in 1 gallon of warm water. Your sanitizer is your first line of defense in making sure you don't get any microbial, bacterial, or fungal infections in your wine. Anything that's gonna touch your wine needs to be sanitized with your sanitizing solution. So after you put your 2.5 teaspoons in there, just give it a nice gentle stir until all of the little granules disappear from the bottom of your bucket. So like I said, anything that might touch your wine should be sanitized, and that includes your airlock and your stopper. Our yeast is the only microbe we want touching our wine, and specifically that's because we have chosen this yeast for this exact wine. So we don't want anything else, wild yeast or bacteria, getting in there and changing the flavor of what we're making. So we want to make sure that our bucket is sanitized. And that just involves making sure every single surface has been hit with sanitizer and allowed to soak for at least 60 seconds, up to about 2 minutes. This is a no-rinse sanitizing solution, so you just want to shake off any excess and you're ready to make wine. So since we're doing a Cran-Apple wine, we're going to put the first half of our juice directly into the bucket. It's okay to let it splash around and aerate some. That's good for your yeast. Next, we're gonna put in our sugar. This is called chaptalization, and essentially what we're doing is providing more fermentable sugars beyond what's in the Cran-Apple juice, so that way it raises the ABV to a higher, more wine-like level. If we just fermented the Cran-Apple juice, we'd probably be in the range of 6 to 7% ABV. This is gonna take us up to between 11 and 12%. After the sugar goes in, we'll add our nutrient, our pectic enzyme, and our wine tannin. Now with a sanitized spoon, we just want to give that a good stir until it's all combined. And now the rest of our juice goes in, and we're going to be filling it up to just past the 1 gallon mark on our bucket. This gives us a little bit of wiggle room when we're racking from primary into our secondary vessel, because we want to minimize headspace as much as possible. Perfect, we used up both of our containers of juice. Give that one more final stir. And now it's the moment we become a winemaker, the moment you pitch your yeast. You could use 1 gram of yeast for a 1 gallon batch. I'm gonna go ahead and pitch in the entire 5 gram packet in this video. If you're going to use only a partial packet of yeast, you'll just wanna fold that over, seal it up, and put it in your refrigerator until the next time you use it. Here, like I said, we're gonna pitch the entire 5 gram packet of yeast. Lid goes on. Our stopper goes in. And our airlock goes in. It's a 3-piece airlock, so you have the outer piece, that inner part that goes over the post on the inside, and then the cap that will go on top. And we'll just fill our airlock with some sterile water up to the fill line, and then put our cap on it. We're gonna put this away in a room temperature space and forget about it for about 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks we'll come back, see if it's ready to transfer to our secondary vessel. It's time to get our cranberry wine transferred from primary to secondary. First things first, we gotta get all of our gear sanitized, so I've mixed up some of our sanitizer here. We're gonna get everything sanitized, Then we're going to use our sanitized racking cane and tubing to pull our wine from our primary bucket down into our secondary carboy. So let's get started first by getting everything sanitized. To get our wine transferred, we need to start a siphon. To do that, we're going to fill this tube entirely with sterile water. This is water that I boiled and allowed to cool. You can also use aggressively filtered water or spring water from a bottle, but you just want to make sure it's relatively sterile because you don't want to introduce any microbes to your secondary. So we're going to fill this up entirely with water, pinch off the end, stick our racking cane in, and when we let go of the tube, wine will start flowing. As soon as the wine comes to the end, pinch that off again and transfer it directly into your carboy. I know this sounds tricky, but you can do it. Okay, here we go. As you get close to the end, you'll want to tip your bucket to make sure the end of your racking cane continues to be submerged under the wine, so that way you don't get a break in flow. Put our airlock back in and then leaving it be for 2 weeks while it ferments. Now's a good time to go ahead and put it in your refrigerator and allow it to cold crash. That will help drop the yeast out of suspension and let it clear up a little bit. Look how crystal clear that is. Excellent. So today is the day we're going to get our wine transferred over to our bucket and stabilized. And then 24 hours later, we're going to add our back sweetening sugar, stir it very gently to combine and get it bottled. The first step in this process was to get all of our gear and equipment sanitized so everything's ready for it to transfer over. Then we're going to start our siphon and move this wine from secondary into tertiary, which is technically just our bottling bucket. Then after that, we will add our stabilizers. So let's go ahead and get that moved over. I'm tilting this just a little bit so that way the tubing remains submerged for the first little bit of racking. We don't want it to splash too much because that'll introduce some oxygen. So we're just gonna tilt that back and let it finish racking. Next, we just need to add our stabilizers. So we're going to take our Campton tablet, just one of those in a gallon. This is made from potassium metabisulfite. It's an antioxidant, and it's one of the 2 chemicals needed to properly stabilize your wine. So we're just going to take this tablet, put it in a clean spoon, put the other clean spoon on top, and crush it up. That turns it into a powder, which you can easily add to your wine. Second stabilizer is potassium sorbate. This one impacts the yeast's ability to reproduce. So this, combined with the potassium metabisulfite, stops any microbial activity in a finished wine. We'll be using a slightly rounded ½ teaspoon of potassium sorbate. Just like that. So in 24 hours, this will be effectively stabilized. We'll come back at that point, add our back sweetening sugar, and get this wine into bottles. Time has come to get our cranberry wine sweetened and bottled. I would like this sweet, so I'm using a ½ cup of table sugar to back sweeten this. Basically what we're gonna do, we're gonna pop the top on this. We'll slowly add in our sugar while stirring with a sanitized slotted spoon. And the slots in the spoon allow some of the wine to pass through, so it's kind of helpful in getting the sugar mixed in. We'll do this process kind of slowly. It'll take about a minute, and then you won't feel those crunchy granules of sugar in the bottom anymore. That means you're done. Once we've got that sweetened up, we're ready to get it into bottles using our sanitized siphon. So let's do it. Sugar goes in. You're trying to not really break the surface tension of the wine as you do this. You don't want to mix in too much oxygen. So just stir slowly, gently, and eventually after about a minute or so, that sugar will dissolve completely. All right, it's all mixed in. Now, let's get this into our bottles. We have our clamp for our hose positioned so it's just above the top of the bottle. That way, as soon as the level of the wine reaches the top of the bottle, we can clamp that off and move it to the next bottle, making sure that we have very little air space in the top of each bottle beneath our corks. Doing it this way also allows us to fill the bottles from the bottom up, which also minimizes air contact as the wine is transferring to the bottles. We probably could have got one more like 12-ounce beer bottle size bottle out of this batch, but I've got nothing to do this afternoon. Really nails the flavor of cranberry, but because we didn't use 100% cranberry juice, it's still drinkable younger because it's got more of an apple juice base. But that said, it doesn't really drink like a cider. The cranberry flavor is the dominant flavor in there, but you don't have that big kind of astringent punch of the tannin and the acid that's unique to cranberries in there, kind of detracting from the winey flavor. So using the Cran-Apple juice is kind of a nice hack to have a young wine that is still relatively drinkable. Now that said, you put this back for a month, 2 months, 3 months to age, and a lot of those flavors are gonna meld and give you a more cohesive end product. Well, I hope you found this video interesting and insightful and helpful. If you did, make sure to follow Craft-A-Brew here on YouTube. We have lots of homebrewing content and tips headed your way. Until next time, happy winemaking.